talk about MyPlate. And many of you have probably heard of MyPlate, even maybe as students in school recently. MyPlate is a tool that is used to help recommend and translate some of those dietary guidelines into more of a simple image so that we can follow it and help guide our nutritional choices. And actually, I hyperlinked this image. So if you go to your PDF of your lectures, you should be able to click on that image and you will go to the MyPlate website where you can actually identify your own estimates for your nutritional needs. This is actually a helpful tool for you to use for your clients as well if nutrition is one of those components that they are interested in making behavior change with. I do want to make sure I highlight an issue with the MyPlate. It doesn't take into consideration cultural aspects of food. So there are many types of cultures who don't include all components of MyPlate in their cultural food choices. An example of that is commonly is dairy. A lot of cultures don't include dairy as part of their food. And now it's kind of like we're coming as a government and saying, hey, you need to make sure you include dairy to make sure that you're having a healthy nutritional choices. And that's actually not necessarily the case. So I just want to make sure that you understand that it's not your job as a health coach to push all aspects of this, particularly if it doesn't align with your client's culture. So make sure that you understand that, understand their nutritional choices and why they're making those choices before you go in and say, here's what you need to eat. So this is another helpful tracking tool, and this is from the National Institute of Health, and it's the NIH Body Weight Planner. And it determines a client's caloric needs to maintain their current weight, reach a goal weight if they want to do that, or sustain a new body weight based on planned physical activity levels. It's been developed and validated by researchers so that you can see and account for metabolic changes that occur with weight loss. So that hyperlink, if you click on that, you can go to the NIH Body Weight Planner. Again, this is a nice tool to add to your toolbox. So let's talk about this term culinary medicine, and this is kind of a new area. It's an emerging field of medicine, and it's really been designed much like exercise is medicine so that we can prevent and treat disease through the preparation and consumption of high quality, healthy meals that are tailored to help an individual with a specific condition or ailment. So, and this is, like I said, very much like exercise is medicine, but now with a nutritional lens. And it typically results in a food prescription. So this is an example, right? And the acronym is food. So F stands for frequency, so the amount of food, beverage, or meal to be eaten. O stands for objective, the goal or reason why the food should be eaten. Another O stands for options, how much and how to prepare, grow, shop, and serve it. And then D is for duration, how many times per day, week, or month. Now, to be clear, you are not someone who can prescribe medicine. So we will not be prescribing food prescriptions. That is not within our scope. However, it is important to know that that exists, and if you are building that network of professionals, medical professionals around you, finding a medical profession who respects and acknowledges the influence of food on disease is important. So making sure that you can kind of find someone who believes in things like this and will recommend and do food prescriptions is probably an important step in your coaching practice. So now let's move on to the guideline 2 for those dietary guidelines. And this guideline says we want to focus on variety, nutrition density, and amount. And we do this to meet the nutrient needs within a caloric limit while also choosing a variety of nutritional dense foods across a large range of food groups, but in those recommended amounts. And so I'm going to go ahead and break down these different food groups so you can kind of see the food groups that we're eating the most amount and the food groups that we need to eat less of. So vegetables are really important, right? It's an important contributor to our daily healthy eating patterns. And what you can see on the right is you actually have a figure that shows the current vegetable intake compared to our recommended intake, where the orange dots are kind of what we're consuming on average, and it has males on the left and females on the right. And then the blue is kind of that recommended amount. And so these vegetables can be broken into 5 different subgroups: dark greens, red and orange, legumes, starchy, and then that other group that we kind of talked about earlier. So dark greens are going to be the highest in vitamin K, whereas you have those red and orange vegetables that are really going to be rich in vitamin A. Legumes, like we know, are really high in fiber, and then those starchy vegetables are actually really high in potassium, so that's important as well. Fruits, again, are a key nutrient, and it's important that we limit the amount that we get from dried, canned, and fruit juices because they tend to be higher in things like sugar. And no more than half of our fruit should come from fruit juice. And again, you have this figure about how much we're consuming versus how much we should be consuming for fruit, where orange dots are the average consumption. Again, we are under consuming fruit for both males and females across the lifespan. Now, grains are also an important thing to include in our diet. They can be both refined or whole, where refined are heavily processed and they tend to not really provide a lot of nutritional value. Whole grains are going to be those ones that kind of have the entire grain, the kernel, and it's going to provide a little bit more heart health and nutritional value. Again, you have this figure on the right, and you can see that we actually do a better job of consuming the amount of grains that we should be consuming throughout life. But again, as we get older, we actually tend to consume less grain. So that's something to be aware of, and that's across both males and females. Now, looking into dairy, dairy it tends to be high in calcium, phosphorus, certain vitamins like A and D, really good with certain proteins that we want to get, and like things like zinc and magnesium. But again, dairy is one of those that culturally, a lot of cultures don't include in their regular dietary practices. So be aware of that when you're working with your clients. Again, if you look at our dairy consumption across all age groups or most age groups other than children, and males and females, we tend to underconsume the recommended amounts of dairy. Now, looking at protein is an interesting thing because we're in the fitness industry and there's a real push for eating foods high in protein. And so this is kind of on average. We know that protein foods are actually really helpful for us, and they can come from not just animal sources, but plant sources. And we know we need them for muscle recovery, for building muscle. And so it's an important aspect of our diet, but it is important to know that it's actually the one that we consume the most of, particularly males. So if you looked on the left-hand side, you can see that males, particularly later on in life, tend to actually consume more protein compared to females. Whereas females across all age spans tend to be on the lower range, if not even meeting the recommended amounts. Now let's switch into oils. It's advised actually that we consume about 5 teaspoons of oil per day because actually some oils can be really, really healthy for us, especially those that are high in omega-3s. It's not a primary food group, but again, it can be very helpful, particularly from a cardiovascular standpoint if we're consuming higher amounts of omega-3s. So let's do a learning recap. I want you to know what MyPlate is, as well as the NIH Body Weight Planner and how you can use both of those tools with your clients. I also wanted to understand the term culinary medicine and what that means in regards to our kind of current nutritional practices. And then lastly, what is Guideline 2 from the Dietary Guidelines? We'll pause here and I will see you for the next lecture.